My name is Timothy Fair-Matthews, co-founder of First and 10 Productions, also known as F10, and we create content for brands. I'm based here in Dubai, and I'm also a Sony Pro FX9 ambassador for the MENA region. I've loved shooting cars since I was a child. I've had a lot of fun, capturing events, doing motorsport, filming the cars themselves for manufacturers, and I'd like to consider myself very experienced when it comes to it. Luckily, one of our clients, Mitsubishi, tasked us with the job of shooting a production for them where they have two different style productions in kind of one project. As we know, coming out of the pandemic and into this new recession, in the 2020 decade that we've got ahead of us, we've got to be doing a lot more with less. One of the things I've loved about the FX9, and I'm not being biased here, is by how much time it saves you. And one of the things I wanted to really try and do during this production is test its limits with a run and gun setup, very similar to how the FS7, its younger brother, operates, and a controlled studio setup, which is what the Venice is probably delivering. What we decided to do was do two productions for the price of one, essentially. The first one was a social TVC, using the run and gun method, hanging out of the back of a truck, using the Ronin, and really heavily leaning on the auto functions and the content browser mobile app that Sony developed to control the camera, as opposed to investing in a black arm and a rig and a load of crew. But then when we were in the studio with lots of gaffers, lots of lighting support, controlled AC, and a complete opposite environment to what we had with the social TVC style production. One thing that I love about the FX9 is that the Sony lenses that we have are almost coming alive again. The Sony FS7 kit lens that normally comes with it on the FS7 Mark I, the 28-135, I'll be honest, on the FS7 with the Super 35 frame sensor is, it's not, the field of view is not that wide. But thanks to this new 6K full frame sensor on the FX9, we were really able to discover a whole new look with these lenses that we have. One of the best things that I found with the FX9 when we were prepping it is very similar to the FS7. Everything was very familiar. Now, we wanted to start the production off by shooting our heroic car-to-car shots first, because we're starting in the early morning. We were filming in the Dubai Marina, we were going very slow speeds, and we thought, let's use an opportunity here to really get a wide range of shots from car to car, using all the autofocus functions and me just controlling things like white balance and focus, iris and zoom, all from the app. Now, one of the lenses we use actually was not even a full frame lens, even though this is a full frame camera, so we had to use the Super 35 scan mode, but it was the 18-105 FS5 kit lens that Sony have. It's an f4, which is perfect for obviously shooting car to car because you don't want that depth of field too narrow, and it's a really fantastic light lens. So we put this on the camera to start with, and we wanted to test it out. We also had a 58mm prime, which was obviously co-designed by Zeiss, and that was also fantastic because that has a fantastic artistic look and gives you just that real good quality depth of field. So on our first production day, we got into the back of the Dodge Ram truck that I have to film the car-to-car, and me and Ludovic were in the back of the bed, and I was controlling the camera through the app. Everything was seamless. The camera was quite light, we stripped it down, we had the 18-105 lens on it, and I was able to fully control the camera from the phone. We did actually have a Teradek also put on the camera just so I had a feed, but the content browser mobile app was actually very reliable and I didn't actually end up using it. As soon as we went out, we obviously had the fluctuation of it being sunrise with such a dynamic, we had such a difference in terms of light exposure. And I remember there was one particular moment where we were shooting in the marina, and I remember we just did a U-turn over the bridge and we had the sun pointed behind us, and it was just when the sun was coming up and my exposure was way off, the white balance was way off, and we also wanted to get a tighter shot. And I remember zooming in on the app, changing the white balance, putting on an ND, changing the iris, and I did it all in a matter of seconds. Previously we had a crew of 8 to do this before, using a different kind of camera on a black arm, on a Ronin, and I wasn't even holding it, and it just me and Ludovic, the DP that I had with me, we just laughed at the convenience. It meant that we were able to finish our shoot much quicker. We got all the shots we needed, and we even got to experiment with some other lenses as well on the actual Ronin setup, which is something that we probably wouldn't have done before, and we were blown away by its performance. Everything was really, really smooth. It meant we wrapped early and we got ahead to our next location, which was fantastic. After we moved on, we also had the camera put on tripod, we also had it on shoulder mount setup. And again, we just rediscovered the lenses. One of the lenses that we never got to use very much when we had the FS7 Mark I is the 28-135 f4 lens that comes with the camera. We don't find the field of view being too fantastic on the Super 35 sensor, but with the FX9's full-frame 6K sensor, it was almost like rediscovering this lens. And that's something that I particularly love with this camera. It's almost like it enables you to rediscover all the other, camera assets that you have. It's not, too different for you to have to relearn something new. It's pretty much pick up and go. And for something that was so run and gun and we had so little time to do, it performed incredibly well. We were then going into a studio environment where we had to control and shoot the cars and light them in a very specific way, where we had to shoot something very cinematic. The first thing I noticed that when I did that, it's obviously we had to keep the camera on a Super 35 scan mode because the lenses were not full frame, but that didn't matter because we don't really want to shoot cars on too much of a wide lens. But we realized straight away that when we put it into a studio environment, it felt just as at home as it did outside on the Ronin setup as it did on a very controlled slider or tripod with PL mount lenses. It's here where I really saw the color science come alive from the Sony Venice and all the technology that's been shared from that camera. It performed incredibly well. It got to a point where we almost forgot about the camera. It never was causing a problem. It was very versatile to take on and off the rig. We were putting it inside the car, outside the car, and we actually shot 4 cars in the studio environment, and we managed to get a lot of amazing content. One of the things I particularly love about this camera is the dynamic range it has. The image quality is far superior, and the dual native ISO settings that you have really enabled us to get the most out of the low exposed shots that we probably wouldn't have got on the FS7. One of the best traits I think the FX9 had on the studio shoots particularly is that it enabled me to focus a lot more on the lighting and actually bonding with the crew and being efficient with the shots list that we had on set. We were able to focus more on the shot sequences and getting the shot list done and focusing on the lighting, and it was very easy to use. The DP that we had, I was directing it of course, the DP we had, Ludo, who also helped me on the run and gun TVC style production, found it incredibly easy, but it felt like a completely new camera. It felt like a cinema camera. I'm a huge fan of the F55 and I'm also a bigger fan of the Venice, but having something that shares that knowledge and that technology into something that can be applied in a run and gun setup is just phenomenal. We all know that time is crucial on set. Big cinematic production cameras deliver amazing quality. The Venice will never be comparable in that respect. However, it's not something that you can just plonk on a shoulder and off you go. It's not something you can necessarily man fully yourself. So one of the best things I would say that this camera has done is it's clawed back the time that we previously have lost in other productions. I'm not going to name names, but I've used a wide variety of other cinema cameras, and the complexity, and yes, they're very versatile and they're modular, you can build them up how you want. Having something that's a little bit more simpler but maintains that image quality of a cinema grade camera, it is just a fantastic asset to have. To be honest, at the end of the day, whether you're shooting something that's for fun or whether you're treating production as a business, time is one huge factor that sways everything in terms of what you deliver in terms of a quality output. For having a camera like this that was versatile in the run and gun setup as well as the cine setup, I don't think there's a camera on the market, without sounding biased, that compares to anything close to this.